I'm going to use another workspace that's set up to do the update. And the only difference about this workspace is that I've set it to say update in this operation. And I'm going to say that the license number is the key. So I'm going to read an input file. And Brian has prepped an input file for me. Thanks, Brian. And I think it's this one that's called updated business owners. Let's take a look here. Yes, thanks. And so really we have some ownership changes of those first 3 licenses that start with the 00. Looks like Zach, Zoe, and Zadie seem to have taken over. And so what I want to do is make sure I am pointing at, I'll just change this to make sure that it's going to that updated business owners CSV file. Indeed it is. And so I'm going to go ahead and, I can look at that file ahead of time by just hitting that button. Yeah, there they are, Zach and Zoe and so on. They're all in great shape. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. And what could possibly go wrong? You think anything's going to go wrong, Brian?
I don't know, Dale. I don't know.
Translation was successful.
Oh,
that's happy. We had 3 records go through. And so I'm just going to take a quick peek at the resulting output. And we'll see if those business licenses that have zeros at their beginning. So I got to go and sort the licenses because stuff has moved around in the database now. So I'm going to go for there we go. Okay, so here's the 00. And yeah, the email is Zed Rake. That would be Zach, I think. But whoa, wait a minute here. Jack, Jasmine, and Josie are still in the game. And yet their email addresses have changed. What has happened? Dun, dun, dun. Well, let's take a look. What did we actually read? What in the world here? If I hit the green button, what I actually see is that I have no values for the first and last name. They're missing. How could that be? And yet, if I look at the original data, which is this button here, there they are. What is going on? If I look over here, I don't know, Brian, what did you do? What kind of tomfoolery is this?
I think you might have a case of schema drift there, Dale.
No, could it be? Let's take a look more carefully. Brian knew that we've had some troubles where those spaces cause us sometimes to be replaced by underscores, as you saw at the beginning. So you must have decided that's it. You've had it with spaces in the column names. Is that what you decided?
Absolutely.
So the workflow just worked, and now we have data we didn't expect. So if we look over in the translation log, and I know Annabelle's a big fan of filtering the translation log, if I hit this button here, I can see what warnings were there anyway. Okay, and look at this. There it says, the attribute first space name exists on the schema but wasn't found in the file. So we were getting a clue that there was some troubles here, and maybe one day we could graphically show or give some hints, but right now it's in the log. And so what we have is that we're thinking we're reading things with spaces in the names, but indeed we aren't. And so we could fix this, and actually I'll show that because it's something that folks don't often know. This would be, somehow you found out that this is the problem, and you've decided that from now on you're going to have these kind of input files, so it's worth your while to actually fix your workflow by hitting the update reader. So I'm right clicking on the reader in the so-called navigator pane, and I'm going to update this reader. And I'm going to instead, yeah, there it is. It's pointed to the updated business owners. And if I look in the parameters, I can see that indeed there is no space. And I'm going to say to update both the reader and the feature type, which is our word for the definition that's on the canvas. So if I do this, boom. Now I see these ones have no spaces. And then I have to go kind of old school here and do the mapping. You can also do this with an attribute manager. I don't know, Mark Ireland would have the best practice, but this was the way that the original founders imagined you'd fix this. And you'd connect all these lines. And now I could run this. And now we should be doing that update. And if I go back here and I look at the result, I'm hoping I'm going to see my friends Zach, Zoe, and Zadie. I may or may not have renamed them just to be easy to find. Okay, so let's sort this. And sure enough, there they are, all is well in the universe. And I'm now set up to handle Brian's new data files. Let's make sure that we never have blank values in here. And so I can use a transformer called the attribute validator. And in here, I basically said, look, I am never expecting there to be an empty value for any of these columns. And if there is, we're going to raise some heck and make sure that we warn people. So it's going to run through the attribute validator. Let's just see, which file do I have this pointed at? Yes, I've got the one that Brian gave me. And so if I have any records that fail, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to pull all those errors into one message. So they come out, the errors come out in this list called FME validation message. Let's actually just go ahead and run this and see. So I'm going to use the run to here business. That runs part of my workflow. There's my failed ones. If I turn on the feature information window, which is this one. Okay, select one of these guys. Then let's go over here and take a quick peek. So this record that came out of there should have these, there they are, some validation messages that say things like the first name fails the check. There's just a lot of complaining going on here. So I'm gluing those all into one string. So if I run to here, I take a look at the list concatenator's output. I've got something here called all issues, and there you can see I've glued them into a nice run. And I'm gonna, if I have any issues at all, I'm just gonna say, look, one is enough. So I'm gonna use the sampler to say, take only the first one, please. And then we'll send an email to the FME Meister, and then we'll also route that to the terminator. So basically that will stop this translation before we actually go for the load. And so in the top part of the workflow, I have all the data going through into a feature holder, which is going to stop everything up. And then at the end, if we actually succeed and there's nothing bad happens, and this would let loose and off it would go. Now, to ensure that this is kind of happening after the email, I'm going to route something from the email into the feature holder. I would never want to write this over to here, but I know that I won't because I'm ending the translation. So I'm going to go ahead and run this all the way. And so it errored out. I was scared there briefly when I saw the word a fatal error, but I shouldn't be afraid because it was me that caused it to fail. And I can hop out here and let's see if the FME Meister, FME Meister doesn't have an email. There it is. Okay, and a nice email arrived that says, okay, these things we're not having any values. So that's a way of stopping things by checking the content of the data and getting mad if anything is wrong. So that's one technique. The other technique is this one here. So here we're gonna check and validate the schema. And now to do this, there's a couple of tricks we're gonna use. And one of them is, I'm gonna go back out to all my input data. Ahead of time, we've made a little CSV file. Let's see, this one here. Yes. That shows what we're expecting in our input. So what I've done is I've taken the metadata, if you like, and put it out. And ahead of this, Mark Stokes mentioned we could have done this using a standard, industry standard XML format. We could put this in a spreadsheet. Heck, you could put this into a database if you want. All we've got is a very simple set of rows. Each of them has the name we're expecting and the native data type we're expecting as well. So that is what we're going to read using this top CSV reader. So if I just run this part, you can see that we've got these. The first name is a string and so on, we got it. The second part is a little bit more wacky, and that uses a reader inside FME called the schema reader. Schema, any format. And you can point it at a CSV file, and then you can say CSV, or it just knows it's going to be CSV. And I can go ahead and add this, and it adds exactly that. And so actually I'll delete it because I don't need that one I just added. Yes. And if I run and see what this thing gives me, this gives me something in FME land that we call a schema feature. So I have one row, and it has this FME technique we invented years ago called a list on it, which lets us have many, many things on one. So we see that we've got attribute 0, attribute 1, names and native data types and things. That's what's coming off this schema reader. And this is reading the schema from the input file that Brian gave me, the updated business owners. So if I run that schema into what we call a list exploder, now I have the data type and the names on all of those records. And so these are the first two readers in my panel here. If I click on one, you can see it highlights it, and this one, and it's important that they're the first two because FME will read these in the order that we're going. So we want to do this schema check first before we get to the actual data. And so we come down here, and now I'm going to run these two into a change detector. And I'll invite you, if you want to stay afterwards, Mark Ireland has an interesting way we can do this with an inline query transformer using a bit of SQL that I never knew about. So who out there knows what except does in SQL? You can write us and tell us, and maybe we'll send you a spork. But I hope maybe shouldn't have said that. Anyway, we'll run this into a change detector and not an inline querier. And this change detector is basically saying, tell me if there's anything different between the names and data types. And it looks like we have, like, look at the bottom here, 5 things that didn't change, 4 things that were deleted, things that were no longer there that we were expecting, and 4 things that were added, which were these ones without the space. And then the rest of this just goes and writes me a nice report. So I have an attribute creator that says an unexpected attribute was encountered. Those are for the ones that were inserted. This one tells a sad story that we're missing an attribute. And so this then sets up those messages. If I run to here, I jam them all into one feature. So if I, again, look at this, I've got one row and it's got a list with all these messages in it. And then I, again, slam these messages into a single one. So the concatenator then gives me this nice, let's just look, yeah, this nice thing. I actually concatenated them using a line feed in between. So the separator character is a line feed, and to get that, I had to get in here and do the special characters. So that makes, basically I'm setting up a nice email. And then I'm going to take the result and both email it as well as end the translation. And here I want to make sure that my email goes first. So if I hover over this link, it says execution order 1 of 2. Hopefully you can see that tooltip out there. If I right click on the link, I can say set connection runtime order. I want to make darn sure that we do the email before we terminate. And so that's how I pull that off. And now the bottom part of the flow is basically saying, look, we're going to read things from the CSV. We'll hold on to them just to make sure that the top part completes just fine with the feature holder, and then we're going to go for running the business licenses. And so again, if I look at the business licenses, they should have the Jack and friends. Come on, big business licenses. Yes, there they are. If I go ahead and just run this whole thing, oh, once again, I see that we get the thing failing. I can tell that no data got written to the table, so Jack and friends are still intact. We did not corrupt our data. And if I look over on this side, I can see that data did go to the emailer and so on. And so if I look here, I nervously look to see, oh, I don't know why I didn't get the email to go, but that we won't bother sorting out. That is ominous. Oh, maybe, oh, I know why, because I didn't rerun from scratch. Let's try rerunning the whole workspace from scratch. I might have had it in a strange caching state. Yeah, there we go. So now it ended, and yes, we had the thing not work. And so if I go back here, and yeah, there we go. And here we get that nice message I was expecting. So yeah, the partial run there, I had run everything to this point, and so it was only going to finish up, and that's what goofed me up. in my workflow. I'm going to just remind ourselves, what was our strategies? Well, one was we can use an attribute validator to check at runtime to guard. And the second one was validate the schema. So we basically have two things going on in one workspace. We look at the schema part, and then we do our update part. So just to recap the whole thing, when something bad happens, now we can either update the reader and refresh the schema like I showed. There's ways in FME you can trace to see where the impacts will be. If any of them reused the names of attributes no longer there, we got to repair them. Those will be shown as red transformers. Or you can get someone like Brian to just say to fix the input. That's another choice for this kind of situation.